this is about, like, the city right now, the Acropolis right now, everything right now. So I call it this present moment. This present moment, which lives on to become long ago.
When did I first write poetry? First, you have to know that poetry is possible before you write it. To a degree, you have to know. I knew poetry was possible as a kid because my mother read poems to me and because we had some poems around the house. So I knew that this was one way of talking or being or singing, you know. I was moved first to write poetry when I started hiking and climbing into the mountains and doing mountaineering. I started when I was 15 years old. I started doing real mountaineering on snow with ropes and ice axes, climbing very high mountains in Washington and Oregon State. And it just moved me so much. I was so taken with the experience of climbing up above the clouds, getting up so high and seeing this different world, that started me writing poems. So my first poems were about mountains. Then a few years later, I discovered love. So I started writing some poems about love too. Usually I think people start with love poems. I started with mountain poems. Poets are people who don't learn from other people's lives, they learn from their own lives, pay attention to their own lives, and in a sense make their own philosophies and come to their own conclusions and decisions about what's going on in the world. And then maybe they're wrong and maybe they're right. But if they're right, it's real, you know, they've earned it. And so, nothing exceptional. Every great poet, every great thinker arrived at where they got by their own path, and always by accident, by happy accident, by lucky accident. That's all you can hope for. Now, how do you take ordinary experiences and make them into poems? By paying attention to them, by trusting them, by being observant, and giving them full value, by not dismissing them. A cat sitting on a slab of marble is very interesting. There's a poem in that, if you want to make a poem. I saw a very beautiful little kitten sitting on a slab of marble in the Acropolis yesterday. There's a lot of cats living in the Acropolis. I was very interested in that. So there's a point if somebody wants to take that, and a very simple observation. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if my poetry makes life any better. That's up for you to decide. It's made my life better because I've enjoyed doing it, and I've learned in the process. I mean, to be an artist is to enjoy your life, at least for the kinds of artists I know. I mean, there are some artists that like to suffer, but I think even they are enjoying their lives as artists. So, you know, poetry doesn't, we're not really trying to make the world better with poetry. What we're trying to do, I think, is simply to make us see the world more truly. And if we see truly, maybe things will get better a little bit. In the 1950s, the world was in the Cold War, very deep in the Cold War. And the struggle was between the capitalists and the communists, and the leader of the capitalist world was the United States. And the United States, of course, had the largest and most expensive and the most sophisticated military system in the world with all the missiles and all of the atomic bombs. And the Soviet Union, very much the same, had a very high quality, very expensive military. And most of the concern of the world then was in the talk back and forth about the political and cultural issues and the economic issues of the Cold War. That was also kind of a scary time because the threat of the possible nuclear war seemed very real in those days. And I'm sure those of you who are older can remember it well. I and my friends were then in our 20s. And the young intelligentsia and writers and workers of my time felt that the terms of this confrontation were stupid, and that neither the military and economic posture of the United States nor that of the Soviet Union made any sense to us. And that it was extraordinarily wasteful of money and resources for both countries. Which, as we know now, was true. That the Soviet Union basically went bankrupt, exhausted its resources to keep up its military presence. And the United States bankrupted its resources in many ways, so that we now have actually a lower standard of living in the United States today than we had 30 years ago. Because of, not to mention the ecological destruction that took place worldwide in this heavy development of a military presence and the industries that went with it. It was a stupid time. We knew that. We sensed it. We could guess it. And so we set ourselves against the direction of modern society, both East and West, both Soviet and American, to look for alternatives. And some of those alternatives were in art and in the spirit. We looked to other models. In America, we looked to our great poet Walt Whitman. We looked to the 19th century American essayist Henry David Thoreau, who opposed the government during the Mexican War and went to jail. And we looked to Eastern thought, Taoism, Buddhism, for simpler models of sophisticated and civilized life without so much materialism. And our opposition to established culture at that time was not taken lightly. So it became a relationship of mutual dislike, and the Beat Generation was highly criticized and dismissed by right-wing and even, just ordinary conservative intellectuals and writers. But particularly in the poetry of Allen Ginsberg, a powerful plea was made for a different way of seeing the world. Allen made a powerful social and psychological plea in his very famous poem, Howl, and Jack Kerouac wrote novels expressing the attitudes and feelings of a whole generation of people who became alienated from traditional middle-class American values. And I and some of my buddies from the West Coast wrote poems starting in those days about our feelings of solidarity with the natural world and our concern for the destruction of species and the destruction of trees, fisheries, whales, creatures everywhere, to feed these industrial monsters. So that was the impulse of the Beat Generation initially. It actually went on to ripple around the world, and it had an effect on young writers and musicians in Europe and in the Soviet Union and in Asia. That was considerable. It was very interesting. It's very interesting to think that once in a while, alternative thinking, imagination, rebellious new philosophies, and poetry can actually go out there in the world and do something. But that's what poetry can be for.
You can't make a blanket statement. Technology will help. Because we have to be very discriminating about technology. There are destructive technologies and there are very helpful technology. But continuing in the same way with internal combustion engines, burning gasoline or diesel won't go on forever. And it makes the air worse year by year. So we need to be starting right now to find alternative methods of public transportation. The private automobile is a curse, And the motorcycle is a curse. We should all be riding bicycles. So, when oil gets more expensive, automobiles will begin to fade away. Like morning dew, they'll dry up. So what we need to do is to think right now about what the better technologies will be. To speak of information technology, it is a very efficient kind of technology. It does a lot of work with a very small amount of energy. It only takes a tiny amount of electricity to run a computer. So, in a sense, you could say that is an ecological technology. A little energy does a lot of work. There are other territories where it takes a lot of energy to do not very much work. And then in general, we have to be concerned about a mass media-dominated society which is totally consumeristic and only is very much shaped toward wasteful materialism. Good material things are good, but there's too much going on, too much garbage.
Since crude oil, is in a limited amount in the world, and we are using it up, eventually it will become rarer and rarer. Eventually, we'll run out of oil, totally. And as we run out of oil, as it becomes rarer, the price of oil goes up, to the point, finally, say, at some point in the future, ordinary people will not be able to afford gasoline for cars. It'll be too expensive. Then it'll become only the military and the government that affords cars, and millionaires. And then it'll reach another point where even the military can't get it. So then everything has to change. So that's one of those climbing lines. As we all go down, which is another set of indicators: quality of life, cleanliness of air, purity of water, availability of living space, fish stocks in the sea. The fish are getting very scarce, in the world oceans now. Tuna fish is really almost endangered, tuna. Swordfish is almost an endangered species. I don't eat swordfish or tuna fish anymore. It's too scarce. So they're going down. The quality of life all over the world, and actually world income for almost all people is going down.
And the issue really is, and this is an issue in which economics and ecology come together, is the question of sustainability. That is to say, we have to have sustainable forests, sustainable grazing lands, sustainable fish in the sea for the long run, for long time, for 1,000 years. It's not just a reserve, it's like renewable. It's enough that it's renewable. It keeps renewing itself like Artemis. Like Artemis, who always becomes a virgin again.
Yes.
Yes.
And because
But she visits her pool in the forest and becomes a virgin again. That's what nature is like. See, that's nature.
The experiences that I've had came about simply by getting out in the world and looking for a job, you know. That's how I ended up working on a ship. Ending up where my thoughts took me without necessarily intending it to be that way. I did make a decision to go and live in Asia, and once I got into Japan, I lived there for 12 years. Well, that was a decision, but then I managed to go on living in Japan, doing very ordinary things, sometimes living in a temple and sometimes just teaching English. I have done nothing that anybody else couldn't do. It doesn't take a lot of money, for example, to either be out in the world traveling around and see what's going on. And then for the last 30 years, I've lived basically in one place, in the mountains of Northern California. All of this is available to you. You can make your own choices. The point is, experience and observation is possible and valuable everywhere, anywhere, anytime. That what you see, what your life is the life it's given you. Pay attention to it. Pay attention to what comes into your life. Take your own life seriously. And then see what you can learn from what your life is.
The American ecological movement started first with some highly educated people and scientists and people who deeply loved nature, elite groups forming little organizations to deal with specific issues like endangered species. There was a group entirely for waterfowl. And another group formed entirely for other birds. And another group formed for public lands. That is to say, I have to explain, in the United States, there are, especially in the West, there are huge areas that do not belong to any private individual, but belong to the people. And those are called public lands. They are huge. Most of the state of Nevada, most of the state of Utah, 40% of California is public land. And so there were groups that formed to deal with questions and issues about public land, about grazing cattle, and about cutting trees. And those were called national organizations, and they got to be quite skillful at working with politicians and also against politicians, shaping public policy. That is up to 1985. They were the main groups, the only groups. Since 1985, began to form the grassroots groups, the people's groups, the small organizations for specific areas all over the United States. Instead of being about issues like the survival of birds or like timber and trees and logging, they became about all those issues still go on. But the new grassroots groups became focused on regions. So there would be a group just for Southern California, another group just for the Pacific Northwest, another group just for Northern California. And they would deal holistically in all of the issues coming together in the same area: water quality, timber, ecological issues of all sorts, and social and economic issues as well. So that they look not only at the question of preserving trees, but also the question of preserving the loggers' livelihood, the workers in the small towns. Or in some other parts of the West, we have to slow down how much cattle are grazed on public lands, too many cows. At the same time, we have to be careful to help the economy of the cattle ranchers and the cowboys. So it's to balance those two. That's what's new in American life. And then one more element in this is the presence of a political party, the Greens Party, as well. We have a small Greens Party in the United States, but more importantly, within the Democratic Party, we have the two parties, Republican and Democrat. Within the Democratic Party, there is a strong Green Caucus, which is a pro-environmental group of Democratic legislators. So in the United States, I would say now, and this is also true in Canada, we have strong public support for environmental measures. And everyone understands that to support environmental measures means also to compromise, to give up something, to accept less profit, a lower level of profit. In other words, selfish, highly competitive crony capitalism does not work when you try to do environmental issues. But a more socially responsible business will work. Business consciousness will work. And so we are learning our way toward that. It's difficult in the United States because there is, on one level, a very profit-intensive, highly competitive capitalist mentality. But there is also such a large public feeling for maintaining the environment in the long run that it has a good political chance of surviving. In 1972. It was the UN Conference on the Environment, held in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972. I was one of many people who went, not as any kind of regular representative, but with some of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, as observers, and actually we held a counter conference on the environment to highlight issues that we didn't think were being given the right kind of attention. And in the party that I went with were a number of Native Americans, some Hopi leaders and some Chiricahua Apache leaders. It was quite a remarkable occasion, and a lot of counterculture figures from North America were present at that. It was wonderful. At the end of that conference, the New York Times got me on the telephone and said, "Would you like to write a little editorial about your experience at the Conference on the Environment?" And I said, "Can it be a poem?" And they said, "Well, maybe." So I wrote this poem, and I wrote it overnight. I was full of the energy to do it. And I faxed it to the New York Times, which published it on the editorial page the next day. So it's the only time in my knowledge that there has ever been an editorial in the New York Times that was a poem. Mother Earth, her whales. An owl winks in the shadows. A lizard lifts on tiptoe, breathing hard. A young male sparrow stretches up his neck, big head, watching. The grasses are working in the sun. Turn it green, turn it sweet, that we may eat, grow our meat. And Brazil says, we reserve the right to the sovereign use of our resources. 30,000 kinds of unknown plants, and the living actual people of the jungle sold and tortured. And a robot in a suit who peddles a delusion called Brazil can speak for them? The whales turn and glisten, plunge and sound and rise again, hanging over subtly darkening deeps, flowing like breathing planets in the sparkling whorls of living light. And Japan quibbles for words on what kinds of whales can we kill. A once great Buddhist nation dribbles methyl mercury like gonorrhea into the sea. Père David's deer, the Elafior, lived in the tule marshes of the Yellow River, China, 2,000 years ago. It lost its home to rice. The forests of Luoyang were logged, and all the silt and sand flowed down and gone by 1200 AD. Wild geese hatched out in Siberia head south over basins of the Jiang, the Ho, what we call China, on flyways they have used 1 million years. Ah, China, where are the tigers, the wild boars, the monkeys, like the snows of yesteryear, gone in a mist, in a flash, and the dry, hard ground is parking space for 50,000 trucks. Is man most precious of all things? So the Chinese delegation said, human beings are the most precious of all things. Then let us love him and his brothers, all these fading living beings. North America, Turtle Island, taken by invaders who wage war around the world. May ants, may abalone, otters, wolves, and elk rise and pull away their giving from these robot nations. Solidarity, the people, standing tree people, flying bird people, swimming sea people, four-legged, two-legged people. How can the head-heavy, power-hungry, politic, scientist, government, two worlds, third world, capitalist, imperialist, communist, paper-shuffling male, non-farmer, jet-set bureaucrats speak for the green of the leaf, speak for the soil? Ah, Margaret Mead, do you sometimes dream of Samoa? She was there. They argue how to parcel out our Mother Earth to last a little longer, like vultures flapping, belching, gurgling near a dying doe. In yonder field a slain knight lies, down a down, hey down, hey down. In yonder field a slain knight lies, with a down. In yonder field a slain knight lies, we'll fly to him and eat his eyes. With a down, derry, 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 down, down. An owl winks in the shadows. A lizard lifts on tiptoe, breathing hard. The whales turn and glisten, plunge and sound and rise again, flowing like breathing planets in the sparkling whorls of living light. Thank you. Publication is not a big concern. Getting published is not the point. The point is doing your art, making your poems, and then sharing them. And the way you share them is giving readings. My circle, my generation, and my circle of poets, the Beat generation, started an awful lot of poetry reading practice. Not just we started it in the United States,
starting about 1956. And it spread from the United States to England, France, Scandinavia, Russia in a big way, Eastern Europe in a big way, and it spread to Japan. Finally, it even spread to China. I belong to the generation that made poetry go back to the people and become something that was shared orally. Community poets means people who do lots of readings, that they have a public poetry life, that every night somewhere practically, somewhere in town, there are some readings going on that are open to the public. Some of them are free, some of them you pay a little bit for, and it becomes part of cultural life. It becomes really part of the cultural life of any given city or community. One of the things I most admire about poetry is that it is not on TV.
Except for rap, which is...
Yeah, rap is poetry too.
Of a kind.
Of a kind. But people say, gee, why isn't poetry on TV? Poor poetry. Nobody likes poetry enough to put it on TV. And people think that way. Ordinary dumb minds think that way. And I say, no, this is the strength of poetry. This is one of its beauties. It's too subtle. It's too elusive. It is too simple. It is too clear to be on TV. Let's keep it that way. Let's not let it be put on TV. It should be a living art, like drama is a living art. And that's one of the powers of poetry. It strengthens community. Media culture, TV culture, destroys community. It removes people from each other. It separates people from each other. It keeps every household at home at night in their own house watching their own TV. When they used to get together at night and play music in different households, or they used to get together at night and tell stories, like in the villages. Villages, I know this is true in North America with Eskimos and Indians too. Now they all stay home, each in their own house, and watch separate TV sets. That is the destruction of community. It's the destruction of conviviality. It's the destruction of public life. And so poetry also is, oddly enough, one of the things that keeps a shred of public life and community life going for us through the medium of the poetry reading.
Television. It's opium of the people. It destroys family life. It destroys village life. People don't tell stories. They don't play their music instruments. They go watch television. Right. It destroys local culture, local celebrations, and the level of intelligence is very low. We should first communicate with each other, not worry about TV. Communicate with each other. Gossip is the best way to get news. Rather than TV, just get it from your neighbors, get the gossip. I don't think TV adds very much to our lives. I don't have it myself, I never have. I refuse to have a TV in the house. Yeah.
I started teaching in the university about the time most people retire, because I'd already had a private life. I'm now the oldest person in my department.
Really?
Yeah, I'm the oldest person in the English department. I'm older than the president of the university or the chancellor or anybody.
Good for you.
Every once in a while I have to think about that because I keep imagining that I'm young. Well, I used to be the youngest in the group. When I first went to San Francisco, all the poets were older than me. And they were older by me than 5 or 10 years.
You're still young, my dear.
No. I have to make a terrible confession. As a husband, I am monogamous. But in regard to landscapes and places, I'm totally promiscuous. I love a lot of them. And it would even be unlucky to say I like this place better than that place. I've been touched and moved by a number of places in the world.
15 or 20 or 30, I can't even count them all. In 1983, I was with a group of American writers visiting China at the invitation of the Chinese Writers Union. And Allen Ginsberg was in that trip too. So in Beijing, we were finally invited to meet with the Chinese Minister of Culture and some of the other high-ranking Politburo Communist Party members. And we met at the Great Hall of the People. We had drinks. And then the interpreter, the Chinese woman who was our interpreter, she knew that I had translated the Han Shan poems. So she introduced me to the Minister of Culture. I forget his name in Chinese. She said, he is the one who translated Han Shan. And he turned to me with this big smile. Oh, you translated Han Shan. And then he quoted from memory 2 of Han Shan's poems to me. Now this is a Communist Party bureaucrat who knew these poems by heart. That is how much poetry is still part of culture in China. Everybody in China knows poetry by heart and recites it, like you would recite a proverb or something. That's a very, very touching story for me. About 12 years ago, doing some readings and lectures for the Alaska Humanities Council, I was flown in February to Barrow, Alaska, which is at the northern shore of Alaska on the Arctic Sea. It was frozen solid ice, and it was at the Inupiaq Eskimo village of Barrow. It was still no sunshine, still winter, dark. So there was a small audience of about 8 or 10 Eskimo school teachers, 2 or 3 American health workers, and 1 American man whom I didn't get a chance to talk to. The next morning, getting on the plane to fly back to Fairbanks, the man who had been at my reading the night before was on the plane with me. So I sat down next to him and I said, well, what's your story? He said, well, believe it or not, we've met before. And I heard you read poetry once before. And I said, well, where was that? He said, that was in India. In 1962. I said, well, what occasion was that? And he said, you may not remember it too well, but you and Allen Ginsberg came back from Nepal on a bus, and you stopped at the little town that I was in, where I was a disciple of the Guru Nimkaroli Baba. Says I was wearing all white at that time. And you came and you and Allen read poetry for the devotees of the Guru Nimkaroli Baba. I said, no kidding. So I said, well, what are you doing up here now? And he said, oh, now, yes, I'm a lawyer for the Eskimos. 20th century life. Really. This poem incorporates a verse, a little 4-line verse, that is chanted in Zen monasteries after finishing eating your meal from your bowls. You eat your rice mixed with barley and some pickles, and then a server comes by with a big teapot of hot water, pours it into each bowl for you. You hold your bowl out and pours it. You take your pickle and you wash the bowl with the pickle, and then you drink the water. And then you dry the bowl and put it away. And as you wash the bowl with the hot water, everyone together chants the verse, we wash our bowls in this water. It has the flavor of ambrosial dew. We offer it to all demons and spirits. May all be filled and satisfied. Om Makala Sai Swaha. So you'll find this woven into the poem. We wash our bowls in this water, us human beings here on planet Earth. Quote, the 1.5 billion cubic kilometers of water on Earth are split by photosynthesis and reconstituted by respiration once every 2 million years or so. A day on the ragged North Pacific coast, getting soaked by whipping mist, rain squalls tumbling, mountain mirror ponds,
Snowfield slush, rock-washed creeks, earfuls of falls, swirls of ridge-edged snowflakes, swift gravelly rivers, tidewater crumbly glaciers, high-hanging glaciers, shoreside mud ponds, icebergs, streams looping through the tide flats, spume of brine, distant soft rain drooping from a cloud, sea lions lazing under the surface of the sea. We wash our bowls in this water. It has the flavor of ambrosial dew.
There are poets, such as people who call themselves the language poets, who will argue that there is no poetry before language, and that the poem does not happen till the language has appeared. I take a different view. I think that the poem exists in a interior, visionary, visual form and rhythmic form deep in your mind before it comes out in words. And it is that place that you look at, almost like looking at a movie. Just as, we don't think really in words, we think in pictures. When we are deeply thinking and deeply feeling, we think and feel in pictures, so to speak. And we choose or find our way to the language after that. And I know that this is possible from my own experience and from that of many other people I know, that you can visit that space and again find what the language might be, or what language you'd like it to be. Some people will argue that this is not possible. To them I say, you just don't know, because you can't do it. All of these movies now about various kinds of destruction. Godzilla, but also the asteroids from outer space crashing in and so forth. I think all of those are reflecting a worldwide sense that the world is in danger. The fear that the world has really is a fear of ecological collapse. And technological and ecological collapse, economic collapse. It's quite possible that that might happen. So the fantasy of some kind of collapse is in the back of people's minds, and it comes out in these spectacular apocalyptic movies about various kinds of destruction of the planet. The end of civilization is a persistent fear, and partly it's from the Bible. Partly it's part of Christian theology. There are some sects of Christianity who say the second coming is coming very soon. And some of those people are in the American government, elected representatives who believe that. Because we're not a Catholic country, and we're not a Greek Orthodox country, so there are a lot of crazy Christians. Your Christians are just
very nice and organized, and they only have one theory. You know, our Christians have all kinds of theories. Apocalyptic Christianity does encourage you not to care for this world. It's true, and we've had problems with that in American politics. Actually, there have been politicians who have argued we don't have to take care of nature because we're all going to be gone. We're going someplace else. So that's very difficult to deal with. Well, it means going to God's realm, which is, incidentally, a city. Now, I would be more interested in going to the wilderness of God. Now, if God had some very beautiful mountains that were very wild, with lots of wild animals, that would be attractive.
Ceaseless wheel of lives, ceaseless wheel of lives, red sandstone, gleaming dolomite, ceaseless wheel of lives, red sandstone and white dolomite. Driving all night south from Reno, through Cool Porch to Bridgeport, past Mono Lake's pale glow, past tongues of obsidian flow stopped chill, and the angled granite face of the East Sierra front. Ah, here I am arrived in Bishop, Owens Valley, called Papathanassiou not so long ago. Ranger station on Main Street. I am a traveler. I want to know the way to the White Mountains and the bristlecone pine. She gives me maps. Here, the trail to the grove at Timberline, where the oldest living beings thrive on rock and air. Thank you for your help. I go to the pass, turn north, end of day, climbing high, find an opening where a steep dirt side road halts, a perch in the dry round hills, prickly pinyon pine boughs shade, a view to the last chance range, and make a camp. 10 million years ago, an ocean floor glides like a snake beneath the continent, crunching up old seabed till it's high as Alps. Sandstone layers stripped of winding tracks, and limestone shines like snow where ancient beings grow. The mountain spirit whispers back, all art and song is sacred to the real. As such, Bristlecone pines live long on the taste of carbonate, dolomite, spiraled, standing, coiling, dead wood with the living. 4,000 years of mineral glimmer, spaced out, growing in the icy, airy sky, white bones under summer stars, the mountain spirit and me, like ripples of the Cambrian sea, dance the pine tree, old arms, old limbs, twisting, twining, scatter combs across the ground, stamp the root foot down. And then she's gone. Ceaseless wheel of lives, red sandstone and white dolomite. A few more shooting stars. Back to the bedroll. Sleep till dawn.
You know what I really love in the classical world is all these outdoor theaters. I got a book on them, photographs of many of the different theaters in the classical world. That's what we need in America, is to have more outdoor theaters. We need to go back to using those instead of going inside, is have these wonderful outdoor theaters like they used to have in the classical world. Like Turtle Island, the name that we call North America instead of North America, well, because North America is a European name given the continent, whereas the Native Americans had their own name for it already anyway, which was Turtle Island, so we call it Turtle Island. And go from there in the matter of reconsidering what North America can be. In the same vein, a lot of us reject the term New World, calling America the New World. It's no newer than any place else. It's very ancient. And we wish to be connected with that ancientness, not that recent newness. So that's fun.
Just as our old-time Native American teachers in North America, in their religion, speak often of being given the gift of a song from an animal often. And so I had that experience myself. Magpie's song. I should say where I am here. The context, the story, the little story that goes with this poem is, I was driving alone in my old VW bus from San Francisco to Utah to Salt Lake City, across the Nevada desert. And I was going to a conference to argue politics on oil and coal exploration. It was ecological politics. I was very concerned about it. I got so tired late at night driving on the desert that I pulled over and pulled out a sleeping bag and went to sleep by the side of the road. And then woke early in the morning, and as I sat on the gravel in the morning, waking up and meditating, a magpie came and gave me a song about how to think about the future. 6 a.m., sat down on excavation gravel, by juniper and desert Southern Pacific tracks. Interstate 80, not far off. Between trucks, coyotes, maybe 3, howling and yapping from a rise. Then a magpie flew down to a bough, tipped his head and said, "Here in the mind, brother, turquoise blue, I wouldn't fool you. Smell the breeze, it came through all the trees. No need to fear what's ahead. Snow up on the hills west. We'll be there every year. Be at rest." A feather on the ground, the wind sound. Here in the mind, brother, turquoise blue. And the magpie flew off.